them Cowboys! Yeah! Never lose sight of the magic of this football team. Yeah! Here we go!
I'm all in.
And if you are here, you're in the right place. What a great week to be a Cowboys fan so far. And it's a good thing we wait to go live until today and at this moment, because not only did the Dallas Cowboys finally finalize their coaching staff for the next season, they made some roster moves. Their first roster move that they made was Logan Wilson, and we'll get into it. And then the second one was Javonte Williams getting that extension. And we'll kind of start off there. So Javonte Williams, obviously the hometown hero that Dallas picked up and signed. He is getting a $24 million deal, 3 years, $16 million guaranteed, and a $6 million signing bonus. Obviously, super well-deserved. Javonte Williams provided something in the offense last year that we hadn't had really in the past 3 years before that. Had a little bit of it Pollard, but really not kind of like that 3-down trucking horseback that can really, really be a game wrecker, game changer. Somebody at the goal line that you can expect to get in that end zone. Not since we really had that 2016 to 2018 Zeke kind of thing kind of going. But I'm Slater. That's Mike. And Mike, I mean, how you feeling about this Javonte Williams extension? Obviously, you've been advocating for it, so I know you're out of kazoots right now about it. You're super happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. So it's something I expected was going to happen. I'm glad it happened. You know, it was two sides of the coin with this. It was, do you go out and try to do the same thing again by finding a back who's not making a ton of money? He's on a team that he may not have tenure on, or they may be looking to move on with a draft pick or anything like that, and try to hit the magic lottery again like we did with Javonte Williams this year? Or do you just pay him his value and solidify him for the next few years? I'm always, of the mind that what you have, if it works now, there's no reason to try to go out and get an unknown quantity that you don't know if it's going to produce the way you want it to produce. And Javonte Williams is producing. So you pay him.
Yeah.
So we got 3 years, $24 million. I think you said $6 million was the signing bonus, and it guarantees him $6 million.
Yep.
It's a little pricey, it's a little pricey, but I'm okay with it because I know that he's going to be consistent, and he's a talented back, and he's got a good head on his shoulders as far as the type of a person and player he is and what he brings to the team as a leader on the field. He made a statement last year that he now feels, once again, as a football player, he is the best player on the field at any given time. And whether that's true or not doesn't matter. The mentality of it is what he needs to have and the kind of players we want on the Dallas Cowboys. So a good signing. It's good momentum. Glad it's done and we don't have to worry about that. And all that leaves is George Pickens.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was going to bring up. Like, every Cowboys fan should be really happy right now about getting this extension done. Not only because, one, you're not, trying to piddle paddle with, if Rico Dowdle's going to come back or something, which he could as RB2. But, you're not playing this game with who's going to be our starting running back. We played that game last year, and there was a lot of questions going into training camp, preseason, even into the first week of the season. People were saying, do we go, when it came to cut time in the preseason, do we go Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Phil Maffa and Jadon Blue, kind of thing? Or do you go all rookies, right? That was almost like a serious consideration. No one knew what Javonte Williams was going to bring coming off the injury, coming from Denver and all that, out of that Champagne scheme. And he comes to Dallas and just was a game wrecker, broke a lot of long runs, was able to stay consistent and really manage the game as a single running back. Outside of, when we talk about Malik Davis, Jadon Blues, and Miles Sanders coming in for like 3 or 4 carries a game just to kind of be like a relief back. So super excited to have that done. It's really give credit to the front office. We don't give them credit a lot because they really don't do moves like this or really get ahead of the game and get somebody signed. But they're working ahead this offseason. Even with the DC hire, which we'll get into, obviously, and then Javonte Williams now is the big challenge, right? Like you just said, George Pickens is going to be the challenge, and we've talked about it over and over, and we can sound like a broken record, but if they can get that one done, I'd be really impressed with what the front office has been able to do before the free agency / draft kind of timeline.
Yeah, I agree. I'm impressed for the most part, with what they've done with the DC coaching hunt and then the caliber of coaching that they've brought in on the defensive side, and then seeing them, as we'll get into some of these other topics, they've moved on from some players and are potentially moving on from some that were problematic all year long. And now they've signed, their premier running back, and we still have talent in depth behind him as well. We've got Malik Davis is still around. We've still got Izzy Abanaconda in the background there as well. And, that's a lot to have. And of course, Jadon Blue is still around. So good depth for the running back position. And we need that same attention, directed towards George Pickens and then our linebacking core, as we'll talk about here momentarily.
Yeah, and I'll make one last comment before we kind of transition over to Logan Wilson. But that's the focus for the running back group now, is just find that RB2, whether it's already in the facility or going to get, somebody out in the free agency or later in the draft.
Do you think it's already on the roster, or do you think they're gonna do much more? I'll give you my opinion, but what's yours?
I think they have it on the roster. I mean, for the scheme that we are running with under Schottenheimer and with the amount of carries that we saw RB2 get all year, I think you have it on the roster. I don't think you need to go out there and go get this crazy RB2. I mean, if they're only getting 4 to 5 carries, you're only getting an RB2 just in case something happens to Javonte, right? Knock on wood here. But the only reason you need a good RB2 is for that 4 to 5 carries. So if you're getting a guy for vet minimum, super cheap, like a Malik Davis of the world, Jadon Blue on his rookie contract, or anybody else to just come in to do the 4 to 5 carries, and they can pass block and they can do it, the fundamentals right, then they're the guy.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You can afford to pay, Javonte Williams $8 million a year, essentially.
Yeah.
Because you don't need 2 premier backs.
Yeah.
And then by the time he's at the end of his contract, Jadon Blue may be potentially where he's supposed to be, so. And Malik Davis proved that he can handle his own as well. So at worst case scenario, you've got Malik and Jadon Blue in the backfield if something were to happen with Javonte. And then I still have a lot of faith in Abanaconda. I mean, I really think that he'd be capable behind this line and with this scheme. So I'm as secure as I can be on the running back situation. The offense, for that matter, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I most definitely agree. And honestly, let's just kind of transition into it as we talk about roster moves here. Sure. Logan Wilson officially released, right? We traded for him at the midseason deadline last year for a 7th-round pick. Obviously, when we talked about it, it was kind of like a no-risk kind of gamble going on here, right? You really had nothing to lose trading for him. Your linebacking core was terrible. Obviously, Kenneth Murray was not leading the charge in that room at all. So you bring in a guy like Logan Wilson, someone who's older, experienced, someone that you thought could really help out for the back half of the season to make a playoff push. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Unfortunately, he didn't get the snaps. And we kind of thought, maybe is this an Eberflus thing? Is this a, Logan Wilson thing? And we still really never got that answer because we never saw Logan Wilson get to play the amount of snaps that we thought he was going to get to play when we traded for him. So what's kind of your thoughts on that? Do you think this is kind of just like a Christian Parker is kind of wanting to clean the slate? We got free agents maybe he's looking at, guys he's wanting to draft looking at, and he's wanting to clear out because they saved $6 million in cap. So how do you feel about this move?
I think it is the mind is there.
Yeah.
But the body just can't perform at the level that we would need him to be a starter. I know he's only 29, but some guys they lose a step a lot faster than they should. And, their cutoff lanes, they can't close on them fast enough. And I think that as a coverage middle linebacker, he was still capable of controlling between the hashes, but in that box and the seams, he would have been fine, dealing with tight ends. But the only time I really saw him struggle, he identified and broke down play calls fine. But when he had to get to a sideline, to stop a running back running outside the tackles, he did struggle a little bit. Yeah. And that can be enough right there when you get traded from a team that's already struggling and has benched you, and you come onto another team that's struggling and you can't even make it onto the field as a starter. Because if he was clear cut better than the linebackers in front of him, he would have found the field. So there's a reason why, despite the defensive coordinator at the time. And then to get a new coaching staff that has 3 linebacker coaches, if you count Christian Parker being the DC, and within days of that all solidifying, he's out the door. So as much as I rooted for him and I liked the pick and the trade to acquire him, that's football, and maybe that clears the way for guys like, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Devin Bush, Alec Anzalone is out there, Caden Ellis. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are around and available that could potentially come in here and really help with some veteran presence. And, we've still got Maurice Luafau, DeMarvion Overshone, and Shamar James. So,
yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning is, obviously the mind's there. The physical body may not be there anymore. He wasn't really able to keep up with the dropbacks, the sideline speed that we're looking for. And when it comes to maybe why, Christian Parker and his staff decide to kind of be like, hey, Jerry, you can let him go, it's probably because they're wanting to start fresh with maybe a linebacker or a signal caller that they know is going to be more familiar with the scheme, right? And we'll get into this, but Christian Parker's announced that they're going to run a 3-4 defense with multiple fronts. So in Christian Parker's vision, maybe Overshone is going to be the main guy in the middle, and they'll go out and hunt a free agent that is kind of familiar with the scheme better than maybe Logan Wilson was. But I mean, again, we just talked about Jerry Jones and them, kind of getting ahead of the game here. Well, here we are again, Jerry Jones doing something outside the normal. He is actually cutting a guy he traded for. How many times has that happened? I mean, look, we're still holding on to Mingo, right? And I'm not saying anything wrong with Mingo. I still think he deserves to be on this team and on this roster, but usually we would hold on to a Logan Wilson for 2 or 3 more years just to ride it out. So I mean, it's a smart move to let him go. Maybe they bring him back on a vet minimum deal. Maybe they didn't want to pay the full salary that he was expecting to get. So,
well, you can also look at it this way. If you look at the timing of it all, what was his pay for Logan Wilson's guesstimate?
I don't know on top of my head. Hang on.
So everybody was projecting, while you're looking that up, everybody was projecting that Javonte Williams needed to be somewhere between that $4.5 and $6 million mark. But Jerry pays his guys and he pays talent. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it like that, how do we go from $4.5 to $6 million to, 3 for $24 million, 3 years for $24 million? How do you make that work? Well, you cut a guy that didn't really contribute, wasn't a part of the original game plan, just kind of got brought in towards the end of the back half of the year to help do something potentially, and it just didn't work out. So instead of keeping a guy like that around, you cut him, and that makes up the couple million you may need to sign the running back who is very productive and is very important to the offense. Because you're going to rebuild the defense anyway, and you're going to be spending your offseason between free agency and draft trying to find some talent to bring in there for these new coaches. So that's another thing. So he could just be a victim of circumstance as well.
Yeah. So looking at his contract here, it looks like we were on the last year of his deal and there was a potential out in 2026, and Dallas decided to obviously opt out of it and cut him. But if we would have kind of kept him on, we would have been paying him $6.5 million. And then the year after it had been 7.2. So it's kind of a lot for a linebacker who didn't play as much.
Right. Yeah. So that's how you make room and justify the little extra money that you're paying a running back who probably deserves it, considering the setbacks he's had in his career and getting bounced out of Denver the way he did without being able to show what he was capable of. So, and I mean, as much as Jerry Jones gets criticized, it is one good thing about Jerry Jones and that front office is if somebody deserves to get paid, they take care of them.
They usually do.
Yeah. So
unless you're laying on training tables and
well,
You get into an ego game. You can't let it get ego.
No, you cannot make yourself bigger than the team at the end of the day.
Y'all know why? You know why Dak Prescott gets paid? Because he's very quiet and he's patient. Because he knows at the end of the day, you need him.
Yeah.
Jerry ain't letting Dak Prescott go.
No. Jerry says, homie, don't play that, and he ain't homie.
But that's the truth, right? As long as you don't get into an ego game with Jerry Jones and try to be bigger than the star like we talked about before, you probably get paid if you deserve it.
You're up there in the frozen tundra eating cheese wedges.
Yeah.
Mr. Dallas Cowboy went to Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah, for real. But, speaking of defense, let's just kind of transition into the Christian Parker introduction press conference.
Yeah.
This is going to be what we're going to do here is shout out to Sleeper Cowboys. We're going to use his account, play a couple of clips here for y'all. And what we'll do is basically kind of play them, react to it, and kind of just talk about what we can kind of expect at Christian Parker and kind of go from there. You got anything you want to say before we get into the clips and stuff?
No, I'll let the clips speak for themselves, and then we'll make our comments based on that.
Awesome. Let me get this set up. All right. Let me know if you can hear the audio, so then hopefully our viewers can hear the audio too.
Yep.
Well, the first thing we were going to be multiple. I think that whenever you form a defensive structure, it's about the players that you have. So core principles, we'll be a 3-4 by nature, but 4-3 spacing will be appropriate, 4-2-5 in nickel, different front structures, coverages behind it. But I would say being multiple is probably the most important thing about it.
So first thing we get, right, Christian Parker talking about the scheme that they're going to run, the 3-4 defense with multiple fronts. Obviously, as we are becoming kind of, into schemes and podcasters and really trying to do a deeper dive into Cowboys fandom here. I kind of had to do some research on what he meant by a 3-4. I know what a base 3-4 is, but when you're talking about multiple fronts, what that could mean, right? Obviously, if we're going to run a base 3-4 and with multiple looks, maybe we can have the ability to shift to what this here says is 4-3 looks, a nickel, which is a 4-2-5, and then 5-man fronts. What do you think? Let me ask you this, because I'm kind of jumping all over the place. The base 3-4, are you expecting, Quentin Williams to be that hard nose tackle right there in the middle with the two defensive ends of, Osa and Kenny Clark? Or, what were we expecting out of this 3-man front?
So, I made a statement earlier not earlier in the season, but earlier towards the end of the season, maybe a couple weeks before the season ended, that I didn't like this 4-3 scheme at all. And I felt that with the way with a lot of the build of the athletes in our player groups for defensive linemen and our ends, I personally felt that this team needed to be playing some kind of 3-4 defense. I felt it should have been a 3-4 defense, and I got absolutely cooked for it. But I still believe that, just because by the time Quentin Williams gets there, it changes what we can do. We don't need 4 guys down all the time to stop the run anymore, right? So to answer the question you just asked me, I think you actually put Kenny Clark nose up, and you put our tackles outside of him, and you can do a lot with your 4 behind them, whether you're using linebackers or additional defensive tackles or defensive ends in combination to just throw darts at the board. You're right. You just recycle fresh, angry dudes out there. They're not getting past the line of defensive tackles with the combination of the 3 that we have with Kenny Clark, Quentin Williams, and Osa Odighizuwa. They're going to hold their line. And then you just shoot darts from around the sides. And if they try to come, through the middle behind the centers or the guards, it's going to be tough, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the approach I think he's going to be looking at. I don't think he's saying it's going to be a traditional 3-4 defense. I think it's when you look at it from a game's perspective and you're looking at how they're lining up, it's going to resemble a 3-4 defense. But I think he's going to change up who is blitzing, who is, staying, who's going this way, who's going that way. He's just going to do some different fronts to confuse everybody. But the most important thing I took from that whole segment that he said in the intro, that was his first introduction into his defense, was it's going to be player focused, staff focused on what we have now. Right. So that tells me he does at least see something in what is on the roster now that we can build off of. And he has an idea of what we can already do and just how to bolster that and enhance it with additional players.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, if we're kind of thinking about, this Vic Fangio kind of influence in it, right? What do we see from Vic Fangio, right? I know personally, right, we get a lot of disguised looks. You look like you may not be blitzing, or you may look like you're heavily blitzing. Then all of a sudden guys are dropping back, guys are, blitzing forward and trying to get pressure to the QB. We probably going to expect a lot of 4 rushers, that 4, the 2 D tackles, and then the 2 maybe outside linebackers or defensive ends, however he decides to do it with. I would assume a lot of safety and cornerback blitzes maybe being the pressure there, right?
Right. You make it look like we're going to blitz, and then you drop those guys into coverage, and then the blitzes starts coming from cornerbacks or even nickels, and there's so many different ways you can do that. And it's all based on the fact that we have those really strong, talented defensive tackles that can all be on the field at the same time now. In this situation, if this is done right, where, we get George Pickens signed and then we draft and maybe grab a couple talented pieces, we can turn this around pretty quick and pretty well, in my opinion, just with a better defensive approach using the talent that we have. Because you saw flashes from a lot of the guys on this defensive team. It just never got consistent because I really do feel like they were constricted into a set of specific rules and mandates that they had to go out there and play under, and they couldn't really, it just didn't fit for what they're capable of doing. Jadeveon Clowney is very talented.
Yeah.
Donovan Ezeraku is very talented. Solomon Thomas, talented. It was James Houston could light a fire at any given time and cause trouble for you. So if you just figure out what everybody can do well, and you let our defensive tackles hold down the gap in the middle, then there's a lot that can happen with the flexing around the sides and good coverage.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, the biggest thing for me in all of this is player focused, right? And that's what you were basically hitting on right there the whole time, is instead of being like my scheme, my way, obviously Christian Parker has, when during these interviews and during this time to really study the Dallas Cowboys, he probably came in there with a game plan that was player focused. And that's how he probably sold it to Schottenheimer and the Jones family to get in here and get this job. And, I'm even, we got some viewers commenting here, talk little Dallas here says, I need to see about 5 games before I start to form an idea on Parker's ability. And this year is unfair. Year 1 versus that schedule. Damn. So, kind of rolling into his comment there is, the only thing that's unproven about him is he's had a very fast rise to, the position he's at today. But it's the play calling ability, right? We haven't really seen him be the head honcho. He's climbed up very fast, been assisting, defensive coach, obviously the pass game coordinator and everything like that. So I agree with you, little Dallas there. Seeing that 5 games before you kind of start to form the idea, I can see why you're saying that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I just have a hunch that this is going to work out well, because with Matt Eberflus, it was just like, here's how I prepare. Here's how I'm going to get ready for the game. Here's what I'm going to give to the team for them to get ready for the game. Here's how I'm going to, wake up on game day. But he forgot that it's not about him covering his ass and showing that he can DC prepare really well. It's about making sure that the guys you have on your team can execute your game plan. That's the part that makes you good, and that's the part that makes you move to the next level. And his preparation was irrelevant, because no matter how well he was prepared for the week and the team that we were playing that week, the guys just didn't look like they knew what they were doing. So I will take someone who doesn't know how to look like a really, really good DC corporately and show up on time and punch the clock and be there till midnight and sleep on the couch and all that rickety-rackety. I will trade that in for a guy who knows how to convert that onto the field with whatever talent you throw at him. And that's what I feel like we're going to get from Christian Parker. So, yeah, I agree with you. I still think that we need to see 5 or 6 games from Brian Schottenheimer and the offensive staff as well, just to prove that this wasn't, a one-hit wonder. And now that he has his offense out there to be broken down and to be diagrammed, that he can reinvent it enough to make it a little bit more diverse from last year so that it's not easy to shut it down again. Right. So coaching is about growth and it's about evolving every year. So I think that's something that every coach has to do. You have to stay with the league. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Christian Parker, maybe that's why Dallas decided to make the hire, right? They had the veteran guys, which they've tried before. But if you're going to, and again, comics kind of hinting at this, and I'll show it here in a minute. If you're going to take a really high powered offense, is what we saw from last year. And then if you're going to take a really bad defense that you're trying to kind of rebuild because you haven't put much assets into it, and when you put assets into it, they didn't turn out very well at all. And now you're kind of trying to assemble a defense with some key components that you got, at the trade deadline, plus, what you may get this offseason. You need a mind that's going to be innovative, someone who's going to be fully dedicated and, like what Christian Parker said, player focused, because he has to make what's going to make work in the room. We talked about it before, right? You're not going to change over this defense to where you're going to have let's say 9 new starters on top of Quinnen Williams and someone else, right? You're going to have to maybe work with Malik Hooker another year. Maybe you're going to have to work with a Donovan Wilson another year. I mean, or the cornerback room too, right? Kalen Carson may still have to be here. Like, you're not escaping this disaster defense we had last year. The only thing you can do is move forward with it and then hopefully schematically make it where you can disguise maybe the weaknesses that some of our players have to make them their strengths somewhere else.
100%. You hit it right on the money. You can't expect to get turnover, on Siobhan Revel, Traquise Bridges, Reddy Stewart, Corey Ballantyne, Kalen Carson, Donovan Wilson, Lee Cook. You're not going to replace all those guys. And we've made it very clear with our depth chart approach that they're not ready to take the next step anyway. So you might be able to get Revel playing to where he's supposed to be, and you might get Kalen Carson playing to where he's supposed to be, and Reddy Stewart may be okay. And then you do the right thing with your defensive tackles, your ends, and your linebackers to where they create enough havoc and cause enough problems up front that those guys back there don't get exposed. And when you can't do that, what happened last year is what's going to happen again. You're just going to get moonballed to death because no set of cornerbacks and defensive backs are going to be able to hold receivers for 6 seconds. It just cannot happen. Not play after play after play. Not for 4 quarters. 2 halves. It's just, it don't work that way. Yeah.
And comic here, kind of just get through some of these comments. That's what he loves Christian Parker is what he's saying here. But, he wants to know how he's going to feel going against a Sean McVay, a Dan Campbell, a Kyle from San Fran. Like literally them throwing the book at him and seeing how he survives that, right? Obviously, we knew under Matt Eberflus, we ain't surviving, right? We've struggled with these teams in the past. He also goes on to say, like basically going into the street fight and just how do you fight these high power offenses with a defense that you're rebuilding?
Yeah, I think time in the league and your name and all that doesn't mean anything. You would expect that with Matt Eberflus being in the league as a defensive coach for so long that he would not be rattled by these high level, high operating, genius offensive minds. And he looked as worse of a defensive coordinator with his defense on the field as I've seen in 10 years. I mean, it was awful.
Yeah.
So while names matter, they also don't matter, right? And everybody has to go through a trial by fire. That's just part of the game. I'm on the Christian Parker bandwagon. I think I'm definitely excited about it. You can tell that his leaving Philadelphia has made an impact both on the players and the fans, because, you know, they had never anything bad to say about him. And as soon as he leaves, you know, they try to act like he was insignificant, and he obviously wasn't.
Yeah.
And he learned under a very good head coach. So it's just going to be a matter of time. He still has to prove it. I'm all for that. I don't want to crown him yet either, but I do want to give him the support, because we asked for a difference in our DC, and we asked for them to go through an extensive hiring process and find the right guy. And they went against every code that they normally have to hire him. And even with the staff that they're building around him, they're doing the same thing. They're going outside of what they normally do. And that's all we can ask. I would rather do this and fail than, you know, go the easy expected route and do what we've always done, and to be changing out again in a year, sending another well-known defensive coordinator out the door.
Yeah. And, you know, not to change the gears too much, and we'll get back into the clips here in a second, but Lil Dallas is kind of talking about the cap here, right? Saying that we're 30 million-ish over the cap right now, which we know about. Yeah. And, you know, kicking the can seems inevitable, but next year is going to be similar to this year. If you do that, I figure you pay Dak and CD and bite the bullet this year. Well, we've had this discussion in the past, and what I want to bring up is that, yes, technically we're over, you know, over the cap, but if you look at it, we can make the cap room. But here's the thing: when does Jerry Jones decide to be the gambler and go all in? If you've seen examples in the past, and I've done this multiple times, is like the Rams, and, you know, teams that are winning the Super Bowl now are going all in. This isn't like dynasties anymore. You rarely get it. The Chiefs, yes, they were the last one. The Patriots before that, but, you know, the Seahawks went all in. They made the cap room. They went to go get their guys early, and they spent the money. It's all about when you want to do it. And if you only have 2 years left on Dak Prescott's contract, why not now? Why not? You know, I agree with maybe kicking the can to his final year of his contract, but if you have this high-powered offense, why waste it another year? If you franchise tag George Pickens and you don't give him to a long-term deal, you're only going to have this maybe high-powered offense for another year with Pickens on the team and on the field.
Yeah, 100%. There's a couple of approaches they can take. You know, I know it's corporate Dallas, and, you know, they're the most premier professional sports franchise on the planet. Yeah. So they have to look good budget-wise. But even though they're $30 million over cap, as far as their other teams, Dallas still has one of the best P&Ls in sports, and the least, you know, of extensions and money issues. So they have a lot of wiggle room. If they wanted to manipulate things and, you know, turn levers on contracts and extend their money out and push it out, they could do that. And they could they could build a super team, literally, if they wanted to do so. Yeah. I don't think they need to. I think they need to sign George Pickens and then just find a couple of pieces to make sure that Christian Parker has what he needs to deliver what he wants to put on the field. And however they do that, you know, whether it's through the draft, free agency, through trade, they don't have to do a ton. Like, we don't have to, like, bury ourselves for the next 3 years to do it. They can moderately do it and still have the right kind of success, especially with the offense that we have. This offense can carry us a long way if we can just keep opponents under 27 points. 26 would be great, but if we could keep them under 27, we can win 11, 12 games pretty easily.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And what we'll do is we'll get back to, you know, answering questions, comments, but let's play the second clip real quick. You'd see how Brian Schottenheimer felt about, you know, on what stood out about Christian Parker. Make sure, let me know if you can hear it.
Cannot.
Coordinator on defense, you're basically involved in calling third downs and giving those things. And I say it because it's real. He was the last Zoom that we did. And as he started talking, It wasn't just him talking about his watches and his shoe game. He got a serious shoe game. Yeah, he got a shoe room. You guys can write about that. He's got a shoe room. Man, every time we talk, we just would get off a call or get off the Zoom and get off the interview, just be like, damn, I want more of that. And I think his ability to develop players is very obvious. You look at what he did in Denver, involved with Surtain, and you look at what they did in Philadelphia, obviously with Cooper DeJean and Mitchell and guys like that. He's done it. And, ton of respect for Vic Fangio. He's cut his, teeth under Vic, but he's not Vic. He's got his own convictions and beliefs, and that's what I love about the guy.
Oh, don't help if I'm muted. But obviously, Brian Schottenheimer reacting to Christian Parker right there. Obviously, he loves that he's young, innovative, and he's ready to bring him in the building, kind of what we talked about before. But, kind of give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think that speaks for itself. This is who he is. This is what they like. And the fact that he was able to learn from such a talented defensive coordinator, but yet differentiate himself. And when I listened to this live when it came out, what was important to me was that they said this was their last call, right? And by the time they were done, they had Jerry Jones excited and talking about football to the point where they had to shut him down. Christian was able to draw that kind of excitement and energy out of the people that were interviewing to the point where he was no longer even talking. It was Brian Schottenheimer and the Joneses that were asking him questions and going on with stories about football and some of the things they enjoy about it. So when you can inspire that out of people and get them excited about it, beyond just doing an interview, that's when you know that the passion there and the ability to convey it to others is real. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's exciting to have something maybe just new, doing something different, not doing what we've done in the past with the Dan Quinn, Matt Eberflus, and Mike Zimmer and stuff like that. It's actually exciting to actually maybe potentially be a part of a journey of a young guy actually developing to be potentially maybe a great head coach one day, maybe a successful, well, really head coach is the next step, right? So just being a successful head coach, but to know a part of his journey was making a Dallas defense that may be mediocre and average, maybe great.
Right.
So I'll play this last one that I got kind of hooked up here for us by Sleeper Cowboy. Shout out to you. Appreciate all that you do on Twitter. It's going to be Todd Archer talking about asking him about his confidence.
Christian, Todd Archer with ESPN. How ready are you for this?
I'm ready.
Where does the confidence come from that you're ready to handle?
I think confidence comes from preparation, and I think that I've been able to learn from the right people. So I think that when you've been involved with different people along my journey that I've learned under as head coaches and defensive coordinators, number one, and then the diversity of scheme that I've been involved with, and then you kind of become accustomed to what you're comfortable with in your own ideas. You like certain things, you don't like certain things, what will work, what won't work. I think as you kind of get involved with different people, you kind of form your own identity. So when you have that opportunity, you know what you want to do. And I've kind of gone through that process internally for a great deal of my career. So I prepared as much as I possibly can at this moment.
So there it is right there. That's kind of the clips I got prepped for us, but that's kind of, what our viewers are talking about here in the chat is, we got to see that 5 games. He says he's ready. He's got the confidence, which I love. Right.
100%.
And obviously anybody who kind of comes into a new job or maybe something exciting is always,
but you believe him when he says it.
I do believe him.
He doesn't. Right. He's like, I'm ready. And that was it.
Yeah.
He didn't fill it with a bunch of talk to flavor it up or anything like that. He didn't wait for you to react to see if you approved of his confidence. He was just like, I'm ready. What do you got next? Let's move on. I don't need you to give me the confidence to feel confident about what I just said. Yeah. Right. And that's what I like about him, because I think he's a very internal guy when it comes to learning and growing and educating himself. So I think he knows how to do that. He knows how to self-evaluate, and that is huge. He will be the first one to criticize himself and know that he needs to improve, rather than waiting for, the media or Brian Schottenheimer or even us as, rowdy mouth fans to tell him that he's performing poorly. He will be aware of it long before us. So I think that's an excellent trait to have. And I like the fact that he's just short and simple with his answers, and he doesn't have to elaborate a whole lot. I think he's just ready to put it on the field.
Yeah, and that's what I like. That's what I love that you said that, because honestly, the short answer, I didn't even think about that. He wants to get on that field, training camp and whatever, and start teaching these guys, start drilling it into them. Like, this is a player-focused scheme. We're going to be fundamentally strong. We're going to have multiple fronts, but it's going to get fun if we can do the fundamentals right and at least start creating a culture where we are a scary defense, no matter who's out there, right? Christian Parker is what runs this, not the players. Right. And so that's kind of what I'm excited to get to. Outside of that, man, I don't have much else for us. I got a picture, if any viewers in the comments, you want to ask any questions, go right ahead. What I would like to show you before we kind of wrap it up here is our defensive staff here, right? We got Derek Ansley as our pass game coordinator. We've also got our assistant defensive line coach. We've got our assistant linebackers coach, a defensive line, Marcus Dixon, Robert Muschamp, Brian Smith, Scott, and Uzo, because I don't know how to pronounce that whole name. So Uzo is going to go with. But how do you feel about this staff? I think a majority of it's basically all new outside of JJ Clark.
Yeah, I'm seeing some names that I definitely know. It's a pretty significantly large defensive staff. I know Muschamp's talented. Marcus Dixon is talented.
Yeah.
So we've definitely got some guys that are going to help. I just like the fact that they're doubling down on this a little bit. They're going with a rookie, and they've given him a lot in coaching. But the reason why I like that is because if he does end up building a good program here over the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a tree growing underneath him that, just like with Brian Schottenheimer as an offensive mind, that can go out into the league and prosper as well, which only helps the NFL. But at the same time, it helps Dallas continue to have that defensive longevity and be relevant for the next 7 years. With that many guys under him, learning from him and helping him develop his scheme, they're going to develop their version of it at the same time. So if he does have success, we're going to have a coach out of this group that you just put up there on the screen that are going to be taking over whenever he moves on. Because if he's risen to the rank that he's at this fast, he's probably going to keep rising, right? So.
And that's the hope. Like, we want to start developing that kind of culture. If Brian Schottenheimer is going to be a long-term Dallas Cowboy head coach, he is going to need kind of like that, that Sean McVay, kind of tree or anything like that, where when those guys leave, they promote a guy from within and he steps up. Yes, he has a little bit of struggles because maybe he's a first-time play caller or whatever, but they eventually get their feet on the ground and they start pushing back and they actually start really accelerating at the job that they're doing. Right. And that's all a part of a head culture or a head coaching culture that you're trying to develop and build. So I like
100%.
it. One last thing from comic here. How come Jerry loves his offensive players, that puts our fans in the seats, but why hasn't he valued defense since like Charles Haley, Deion Sanders, and DeMarcus Ware that wins championships? Any comments, thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a great question, and it just seems like whenever there's turmoil with a player that's as big as the team, not bigger, but, it's always defense. Great mentions there with, Charles Haley, and then, what just happened with Micah Parsons, and then you've had Deion on the defense and Rod Woodson and just some of those things that have happened where they've come in and they've gone. But he definitely does favor the offense because he knows, points sell tickets. But I really believe that Jerry, he knows he's on the clock. And I've watched his last couple of interviews that haven't been put mainstream just because, it's not in season. But the way he's answering questions, you can look him up. He doesn't sound the same wordied up, trying to be double talk and say things without saying them and being cute and hinting and stuff like that. He's talking in a different verbiage that lets me know that he's really serious. And I think he's actually a little bit scared that, he's missing out on what he wants to achieve. So he can't bullshit anymore. So I think we're seeing that develop as we're watching this. And I think it's going to continue, but he definitely, I agree with that comment. He definitely needs to focus on bringing some attention to the defense.
Yeah, and I think the attention that we've brought to the defense, we've just missed outside of Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs, for a couple seasons, we've whiffed. Mozzie Smith, Taco Charlton, we've whiffed bad. So, and speaking of, the different tone of Jerry Jones, how do you feel about Jerry Jones not being at that press conference? Usually that's kind of something Jerry would be at least make a comment. How do you feel about that? Do you feel maybe Schottenheimer had a play in that, or is that just something where Jerry's kind of just stepping back because it's, it's a shoddy kind of guy here?
I think that could be it. I didn't think of it that way, but I think he has a lot of faith in Brian Schottenheimer, and he doesn't want to overpower that moment for either one of those guys. Yeah. When he involves himself with a head coach that's on his second year and a coach that's, going to be a first-year defensive coordinator, if he shows up with Steven, everything's just going to be about him. And that just reinforces my opinion that I think he realizes that it's not about him at this point anymore. He's still Jerry. He can still say things. He's still going to draw when he wants to. He still knows how to manipulate the media. But I think he realizes that work has to get done.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to be front and center for it to get done anymore.
Yeah.
But he does have to be excellent in his execution.
Yeah, that's how I kind of felt about it is, it's Shoddy's guy. They trusted Shoddy throughout the process to kind of get this defensive coordinator hire right. And obviously, you got to put credit where credit's due so far. You got to give Shoddy his moment and not overpower it. I think that's a really good way to look at it, too. I didn't think about overpowering the moment with a young, new defensive coordinator that we have. So, to wrap it up, if you're still listening out there, we appreciate your comments, like, subscribe. We hit over 300 viewers. We celebrated it last time, but, wanted to continue it. We appreciate everything y'all do for us. Love the interaction with y'all. Next time when we go live, we'll do more of our depth chart. We need to get that series wrapped up so then we can start talking about free agents, and then hopefully we'll get some George Pickens news, maybe, finally an extension or what's going to happen with him. And outside of that, man, unless you got anything else.
No, that's it.
All right. Until next time, remember, if you're here, you're in the right place, and follow us on Twitter too, or on X for, all your Dallas Cowboys news. It's in the description below. Until next time, we'll see y'all.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah! Never lose sight of the magic of this football team. Yeah! Here we go.
I'm all in.